Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Food Bank's Town Hall meeting. I'm really happy that so many supporters of the Food Bank and colleagues in the community are registered for this morning's Town Hall. It's great to have you all with us. I really appreciate your interest in our work and how you help us end hunger in Rhode Island. This morning, I'm going to be joined by Jim Carroll from the St. Vincent de Paul St. Philip Food Pantry. Jim and I got a chance to visit this summer. I went up to talk with him while they were in the middle of a distribution at the food pantry this summer. And, I just saw the amazing work that they're doing. And I said, we got to have him join us for this town hall. At any point, if you have a question for me or for Jim, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Just click that, type in a question, and a little bit later we'll answer questions. We've been doing these town halls since March, since the beginning of the pandemic. And back then, I frequently was saying to our staff at the food bank that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And they had to listen to me, even though I'm someone who's never completed a marathon or a sprint. But they understood I was speaking metaphorically, and what I was trying to get across is that we were all very pumped up in March, April, and May to try to do everything we could to meet the extraordinary high demand for food assistance, working long hours, long weeks. We were filled with adrenaline, but I was afraid that we would burn out because I knew that this was going to go on for a while. And here we are now in September, and it's still a marathon. My metaphor now, take this to the next step, is that we have to keep up the pace even though there's no finish line, right? There's no clear end in sight to this pandemic emergency. And so we have to keep up the pace because the demand for food assistance in Rhode Island remains really, really high. Before the pandemic, through our statewide network of member agencies, the food bank was serving 53,000 people a month. Now we're serving 68,000 people a month. And the people we serve are really suffering from the economic fallout, from the pandemic, job loss, income loss, struggling to pay the rent and afford to feed their families. And many of the people that we serve are also at high risk from complications of COVID-19. One of the things that we're concerned about at the moment is that as high as the demand for food assistance is right now, it's likely to go higher this fall as a number of government benefit programs are reduced or end. You've heard a lot about the supplemental unemployment benefit of $600 a week that got cut at the end of July. And now there have been a few payments, a few weeks when folks have gotten half that, $300, and now it's back to zero. I mean, that's really going to put people in a terrible bind when they are trying to figure out how to afford the rent, how to pay for food. And we are just expecting that that's going to mean another dramatic increase in demand for food assistance and number of people coming to food pantries and meal programs in the coming months. Over the last 6 months, our member agencies have done an extraordinary job being able to serve all of the new people coming to them for help and making sure that everyone who is seeking help is getting enough food. they've had to do that at the same time, making sure that they're in sync with all the social distancing regulations from the Department of Health, and making sure that just everybody, whether people coming for food assistance or the staff and volunteers who are working, are safe. It's been an incredible effort, and we've seen food pantries, meal programs, and shelters go above and beyond the call of duty to be there for people in need. So this is a perfect moment to invite Jim Carroll to come on board and join me.
Can you see me or hear me?
I can hear you.
I got a note that said, you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
We'll work on that, Jim.
Well, I don't think it's your end. I think it's me. Hang on, I got technical support coming, but
oh, good. We want to see you.
There we go. I think we're good now. Can you see me?
And it's good to see you without a mask, Jim.
I know the mask was a better look, I think, Andrew, but thanks.
So Jim, you know, I think in one of the things that I learned on my visit to St. Philip is that you have really had to make a lot of adjustments since March because of COVID-19. And so could you talk a little bit about what you guys have done?
Absolutely. First, let me say that we couldn't do it without the support and help of the food bank. You guys have been a consistent and reliable partner in making sure that we have food to pass out. But what we saw was really in early March. Went to a meeting at the food bank, I think March 6th, and in talking to some other agencies, we started to anticipate that things were going to change. And they changed rapidly during the month of March. And I think from the client standpoint, they were used to coming into our building, sitting in a waiting room with 15 or 20 other folks, and then we had 9 volunteers in the building. So we had close to 30 people in a space that's a little over 1,000 square feet, and we could recognize right away that that was not going to be safe with the virus coming in. So we started with, well, we'll only bring 4 people into the building at a time. We'll have each of them sit in the corner, and then we'll pair them up with a shopper. We looked at that and said, geez, we still got too many people in here. So we ended up deciding to go to a system that is a little reminiscent of the old days, in that we would pack non-perishable foods of our choosing and bring them out to the car. And we would give them a shopping list to select any frozen, refrigerated, or dairy items that we had. And then we would pack that for them and put it in their trunk, and off they'd go. What we found with that is that we were giving people peas who had kids that wouldn't eat peas, or we were giving them chicken noodle soup and their kids liked tomato soup. So stuff was coming back. We weren't taking advantage of the choice options that we had made available to people over the years. So what we've evolved to is a system where everybody waits in their car. We have 2 people out in the parking lot that will go up and greet them. We give them a bottle of water to stay cool, particularly in the summertime. And we give them 3 different shopping lists. The meat and dairy items that we have available is one list. The other list is the basic items that we have on our shelf that we will pick to order for them. And same thing with the USDA. So there's 3 pieces of paper that they have to end up filling out. What that's enabled us to do is reduce the number of people inside our pantry to 4. What we're doing with the other 5 people, we usually work with a team of 9, is we're setting up probably about a third of our pantry in the parking lot. And we went out, we bought some canopy tents. We usually end up with the bread and veggies outside. And then any of the extras, the items that we've either rescued from Stop and Shop or Target, or have gotten from the food bank where we only have 2 or 3, so not enough to put on a list. And we'll set up 4 tables, and we'll have 2 4-foot wide, 6-foot high shelving units that we roll outside. So it's created a lot more work in terms of having to set up and knock down each time and disinfect everything. But it does give the people the choice that I think is important for them. And we made a commitment right in the beginning when people were coming up, because in those early days of April, mid-March, there was a definite panic and a lot of anxiety. And we told everybody who came to us, we're not going to close. We will be here. We will get you food. We don't know how we will get you food. It'll probably change from week to week. But having the ability to adapt and evolve, I think, has made sure that our people have been able to get good, nutritious food that their family will eat.
Jim, I think that's so important. You know, I agree with you. I think people really were panicked back in March and April because they didn't know whether there was going to be the food assistance they need. And I think as there was consistent food assistance, as government programs came on board, people began, they're still extremely stressed, but that panic reaction began to fade. And, you know, the other thing is just so clear that at St. Philip, people are treated with dignity and respect. And it's so important, given that a lot of the people in those cars were new, first-time people who never needed help before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, food is one thing that they need. I think they need they need to be welcomed. They need to feel that they're important, that we're going to take care of them. We're going to help out. And sometimes that gets lost when you're trying to do so many. But what we've tried over the years, we have a lot of people that are new, but we have people who've been coming to us on and off for a long time. Most of our volunteers have been with us for a long time. So they recognize people and they know them by name. They know their family situation. They know who's battling cancer or who's got somebody in the family who's not doing well. And there's a lot of conversation. The first thing we do when somebody comes in that's from the first time is give them a big welcome and let them know that we're here to serve them. We're not able to do a formal intake at this point because we're not bringing them into the building.
Right.
But we use the USDA, the TFAB emergency declaration form. So we get an idea. We see an address. We got the number in the family. We know what the income is. If they're from outside our area, we'll give them the food and we'll suggest these are the pantries that are closer that they may want to try, and the hours of those pantries, we give them the 211 number. And we try to do everything we can to make sure that they know that they're not alone in having to come for the first time. The other thing we want to find out is how they found us, because if it's a referral from another client, that's important. We've had a lot of that, and we've had a lot of people that have been referred to us this year through 211.
211, absolutely. Jim, you mentioned your volunteers, and on my visit, one of the things that's striking and remarkable is how many volunteers you have, some young, some less than young, let's say. Can you talk a little bit about your volunteer crew?
Yeah, we have about 70 volunteers. And we work normally during a distribution with 9 people. But most people are working 1 or 2 Wednesdays or 1 or 2 Saturdays a month. I've got a crew of about 10 guys. We're all in the same demographic that unloads the truck on Wednesday. So when Joe Reynolds pulls up, he looks and says, "This is the most people I'm going to see all day." We get it done quickly. What we've been able to do is I had this summer some kids that needed service hours at the high school for the Honor Society. We had some young people that apparently were testing the speed limits a little bit too aggressively and needed to do some community service. And we tried to schedule them in where they would complement. We need young people to lift boxes and to put stuff away. And then during the school year, you can't get that. One thing I'm a little bit leery of right now with the folks going back to school is we're going to lose some of those helpers.
Yes.
But the majority of our volunteers are retirees. Some are working part-time. But I'd say, you know, with a group of 70, we go as high as a 91-year-old who will work our meat counter 2 Wednesdays a month. And, you know, we caution her. We really are a little bit concerned that she comes in, but she's a former nurse. And, you know, she takes the safety precautions. And, you know, nobody gets into the building or when we serve them out in the car unless they're wearing a mask. All of our volunteers are masked. They're wearing gloves. We're disinfecting everything, you know, when we start and then when we finish. So we try to make it as safe as possible.
Jim, I know we have some photos from St. Philip to show folks, and we also have some photos from other food pantries around the state. This first picture is actually from the East Bay Food Pantry in Bristol. Very similar idea to what Jim was talking about. They're trying to make sure that even though they can't allow people inside the food pantry because of social distancing, they have this tent and these movable shelves, which allows them to set up outside under the tent. And that allows people choice. They can select the food they want off the shelves rather than taking just a pre-packed bag or box. These are folks, our friends at Good Neighbors in Riverside, East Providence. Before COVID, one of the things that they operated besides a food pantry was also a day shelter. That day shelter has been closed, same thing because of the social distancing. And yet they really wanted to reach out to the people that they normally serve. So they packed bags with toiletries and masks and other basic necessities, and then were able to go out and meet the folks they serve at Kennedy Plaza and get them these supplies. Here is a volunteer at Rycan in Charlestown. There's some pretty nice berries that she's able to provide to folks coming for help. At Rycan, they have set up a drive-through. Again, you know, completely different than the normal operation. This is set up so that both the people coming for help and the volunteers can stay safe. Just loading the food into the trunk of a car. The pantry director at Rycan, Scott Strait, reported that they saw a big increase just in August when the supplemental unemployment benefits were cut back. And you see the cars lined up there in Charlestown. This is another drive-through at Johnny Cake Westerly. It's a drive-through for their fresh produce, which they grow in a community garden. The next slide shows one of their folks bagging up green beans from that garden. You know, they really are glad to be able to provide the folks who are coming for food assistance fresh local produce this time of year. And remarkably, when people are picking up, they also provide everyone who's getting the fresh produce with flowers. So they're giving people hope in addition to food. I think the next slide is for you to narrate, Jim. This is St. Philip.
Yeah, that appears to be 2 tables worth of vegetables and some odds and ends under 3 of the canopies that we set up. I think the thing that if you look at, you see how big that parking lot is. And we've been fortunate that the pastor, Father Frank, has told folks at church not to use that parking lot, use the main lot, because he's reserving that lot for the food pantry and for parish staff. So it gives us a lot of room to expand outside. And you can also see the rural nature of where we are. I mean, if you had told me 20 years ago that there was a serious need for food, there was food insecurity in Smithfield, I don't know if I would have believed you or not. Everybody who comes to us pretty much drives up. This is one of our volunteers. I like this kid. He's my grandson, Cameron. He's one of the hockey players. We got 4 members of the hockey team that were doing national honor stuff this summer. But what he's helping the guests with are some of the vegetables. And you look at that gray cart in front, you'll see a mishmash. That's what we call our dinged and dented cart. We rescue food from Target. And you know, the boxes may be damaged on the outside on the cereal, but the inner bag is sealed, so we'll tape it shut, but we won't offer it as first quality. That would be in addition to any other cereal that they would accept. And based on the size of the family, yesterday we had a lot on that cart, so a small family of less than 3 was able to get 3 items. Larger families were getting 5. So it's kind of a bonus item. You can see one of our volunteers there pointing. He's getting ready to help that lady with the shopping cart unload it into her trunk. The one thing we did notice is in putting the food in boxes, there's an awful lot of weight that gets added on. And these canopies are terrific for shade and a light rain. If you remember the rainstorm we had last Wednesday, they're not so good in that. We got soaked, but we were able to continue to work outside. Cameron must have paid something to the photographer. I don't know. He's very active. I think if you look at the shopping cart that the guest is kind of leaning against, you get an idea that they're getting a lot of food. They're not getting a bag of food. They're essentially filling a shopping cart with what we have on our shelves and what we have outside on the bread rack. Most of the bread is either coming from BJ's or Target or Panera or IGA supermarket in North Scituate. This is a shot of the bread rack. We have 2 racks there. We have fresh pastries, bagels, breads. The young lady who is shopping there is my granddaughter. She was going for National Honor Society hours that week. But the idea is that they're there to help the people make the selection, explain what we've got, answer any questions, bag it up for them. And when that lady who's bent over there selecting the bread is finished, she will then head over to the bread rack, and then the next person will come up. So only one person at a shopping area at a time. This gentleman here is signing somebody up. So he's wearing a mask, he's wearing gloves, he's got a clipboard, and he's just getting them signed in and giving them the 3 different shopping sheets that they'll get. And they'll fill those out. We'll pack the food and get them on their way. One of the side benefits of doing it this way is it has reduced the waiting time for our guests, which is important. So I'm kind of reluctant to go away from this model even after this COVID gets behind us, because one of the problems that we've always had is, backups where people are waiting too long, and we want to get them in and out as quick as we can.
Well, thank you, Jim. On this slide, we just want to remind people to follow us on social media and make sure you're signed up for e-blast from the food bank so we can keep you updated about our work. I think Lisa Roth-Blackman is going to join us, our Chief Philanthropy Officer, to see if there are any questions.
Yes, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We do have a few questions, and I'll just remind everybody, we do have that question and answer box. If you have a question on your mind, feel free to type it in there. A lot of questions about the volunteers. Does the food bank need any volunteers? And would you say that the number of volunteers is one of the most important limiting factors for getting food to those who need it? So I think maybe Andrew, if you want to answer that, and then Jim, you could speak to it at the pantry.
So at the food bank, we haven't had volunteers since March. In order to keep down the number of people that we have in the building following the Department of Health recommendations. Now, obviously, that has been put us at a real disadvantage. It's a challenge to keep up with the volume of work without our wonderful volunteers. And we just looking forward to the day when there's a vaccine and we're past this critical moment and we can have volunteers back in the building working with us. But at our member agencies, at food pantries like Jim's, there's still a need for volunteers. Jim, do you want to talk about, you already talked about how important it is to have volunteers. You mentioned that you've had some folks come to you who were furloughed.
Absolutely, which was a great blessing because they were younger, and they were able to fill in some of the slots of folks who were uncomfortable coming or were unable to come due to health concerns. We have, and I don't think we're probably too much different than many of the food pantries in the state. We're open Wednesday and Saturday, but on Tuesdays, we're picking up from Stop and Shop and Target and bringing the food back and meat, produce, breads, sorting it out, putting it away, getting it ready for Wednesday. On Tuesday night, we have somebody who goes to Panera at 8:30 at night and picks up the day-olds. Wednesday morning, we have a truck that comes in. We also send another volunteer to IGA in Situate, and they pick up food. Thursday, we're back at Target again. A lot of times we have to make a run down to Jaswell's Farm, who's been a very, very consistent supporter of our efforts with fresh produce, but that lot of stuff from their bake shop as well. So, and then on Saturday, we're there again, we're opened up. So there are all different types of opportunities, even if somebody's working during the day, where they could get involved in picking up at Panera at night, or picking up something early in the morning before they go to work. We're in pretty good shape right now in terms of the number of volunteers. I think what we're going to do now, though, is revise the schedule that we've got going into the fall, so we spread the volunteers out on a more even basis. The last thing I want is people to show up and not have something to do. The other thing that we have is occasionally people, particularly this summer, we're on vacation. We didn't have a sub, and we were short people. So it puts a lot of burden on the folks. In the summertime, people out in that hot sun, and it was a hot summer, that wears you down.
It does. Yeah, Lisa, let me just take a moment to say a word about the retail pickup program and the history of that. So about 10 years ago, our supermarket colleagues were noticing and realizing that as they moved more and more to computerized inventory, they had less surplus food to donate to food banks. Really, when food banks got started in the 60s and 70s and in Rhode Island in '82, almost all the food was coming as surplus food from the food industry and supermarkets. But that ability to computerize inventory really led to a decrease, a significant decrease in donations. And so we sat down with our friends at the supermarkets, and they said, look, we do have surplus food, often meat, dairy, and we want to be able to donate, but we have to have a regular schedule of pickup a couple of times a week. And so we got all of our member agencies together, and member agencies were assigned to a particular supermarket like Jim is. They developed that relationship. They have a regular schedule, and you don't always know how much is going to be there, but it's a cooperative arrangement. We promise we're going to show up when we show up, and sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's not as much, but it's really allowed the supermarkets to continue this tradition of donating to food pantries and meal programs. Before COVID, it was in total over 1 million pounds of food donated that way a year. Since March, it's significantly less, just because supermarkets are dealing with their own shortages, which have been kind of random. And so one of the things that we hope, again, just like with the whole volunteer issue, we hope that as we get back to normal, that retail pickup program will be, again, a consistent source of food for our member agencies. And you can tell from Jim's description that to make that work, to make the day when the food bank truck comes to the food pantry and all the food has to be unloaded work, to make the distribution work, it takes a lot of volunteers on the ground. And, I just, want to say how grateful we are for all the people who give their time at St. Philip and across the state to help.
Great. I have another question or two around volunteerism, so I'm going to stay on that topic for a minute. Someone asks, what requirements do you have for volunteers, like a BCI check or a COVID-19 test or anything else? And Andrew, maybe you want to speak quickly to that, and then Jim, you can talk about what you've got at the pantry level.
Yeah, a lot of our volunteers are coming to us through our corporate partners. So a group will come to the food bank pre-COVID. A group would come to the food bank from Citizens Bank or one of the other major corporate groups across Rhode Island to volunteer here. And that is one of the main ways that we have volunteers on a normal basis, along with the regular group of volunteers who have been with us for many years. Jim, you can talk about the screening process for volunteers at St. Philip.
Yeah, we're a member of Society of St. Vincent de Paul, and there are 21 individual conferences throughout the state. And our state headquarters is down in Cranston. So anybody that is in our pantry as a volunteer has to go through a BCI check and are issued a badge from the state office. We haven't done health checks. that might be something, particularly if there's a surge or a spike in the fall, that we may have to go to. But you know, this whole testing thing where I think Mark Matikin had an article the other day about he went for a rapid test and he's still waiting for results. The whole testing thing is going to be a pretty thorny issue for us, I think, in the future.
Got it. We talked a lot about volunteers, but there's a broader question about what specific constraints that we are experiencing, whether it's volunteers or reaching clients or donations, and sort of what are the other roadblocks to getting the work done. So maybe Jim, I'll let you go first on this one, and then if Andrew, you want to add in.
As far as roadblocks, I think we've always had tremendous support from the parish community at St. Philip's in terms of donations of food items. There are not as many people coming into church on Saturdays and Sundays now. So as a result, our donations are somewhat down from those folks. So that might be a little bit of a roadblock. Our biggest roadblock, I think, though, is the limitation of space that we have. I said we have about a little over 1,000 square feet, but in that 1,000 square feet, we have I think it's 7 freezers and 4 refrigerators. That takes up a lot of space. When we moved into this building in 2008, we thought we could have dances in it. We had so much room. Now it's completely packed, and by eliminating the waiting room, we've turned that into an overflow storage area for surplus items and the items that we're trying to stockpile now for Thanksgiving, because that is not that far away, and we know that typically is our busiest month. November, December are our busiest months in terms of food distribution.
Thank you. Just to pick up on the donated food there for a minute, there's a question from Debbie about, are you quarantining donated food? Jim, you first and then Andrew.
We're not. We remove it from the bags, we inspect it, we're tossing anything that's of any questionable out. We are not accepting used plastic bags. Everything that we use in terms of packing the food is either new paper or new plastic.
Yeah, there's not any evidence that the coronavirus is able to be picked up and transferred to folks on food. It's good practice to wait a bit. You don't necessarily need to quarantine food for 2 weeks. Day is fine, and then as Jim said, just making sure that as we normally do, that the food is in good shape and it hasn't been tampered with in any way, and then we know it's safe. I think that in the beginning, in March, when we had less sense of how COVID-19 was spread, there was a lot of concern. I know that people were spraying their food. They were doing all sorts of things. Always be safe. There's no reason to, not be careful. But from everything that we've learned, we know that the virus primarily spread through the air, through people to people. And so that's why masks, you saw every single picture of food pantries around the state, everyone is masked up. Social distancing, which takes a lot of thinking about how you're going to set up your food pantry, both for guests and for the volunteers, and just making sure that, this gets back to one of the questions earlier, that everyone really understands if they don't feel well, don't come to volunteer. Stay home, call your doctor, make sure you're okay and you're feeling well before you're ever joining a group of people. Those are the things that we need to do, and those are the things that I am really confident that food pantries and meal programs across the state are doing.
Great. We have a question about demographics. What are the demographics of the people who we're serving? Maybe Andrew, you want to speak broadly about the entire network, and then Jim, I think it'd be great to hear a little bit about the numbers and who it is that you're seeing up there in Greenville.
Sure.
I mean, one of the things that we know from studies before COVID is that, not surprisingly, we're serving the poorest of the poor in Rhode Island. So folks are coming for food assistance who have jobs at very low wages, who have limited benefits if they're senior adults through Social Security, people who are living primarily below poverty. And we have seen since COVID a tremendous increase in people who are newly unemployed. That's this new group of folks that has led to such a spike in demand. And it's heartbreaking. These are many families that were doing fine and really saw their lives improving over the last 10 years as the overall economy in the state improved. We had, before COVID, we had very low unemployment. We had wages going up. We were on a really good trend. And that has all been halted because of the pandemic. And so folks who are new, needing food assistance are often people who were in jobs that they thought they could count on that in March and April just disappeared.
I think what we're seeing in our area is about 65% of the folks who are coming to us for assistance are either kids under 18 or seniors over 65. That's a troubling statistic. The other 35%, the majority of them had been working or are working, but are not getting the hours that they used to get. When Mark Patinkin came, we asked how many folks we served. That month we had served about 700 unduplicated individuals. But we get a lot of people who come back a second, and in some cases a third time. We had 1,200 actually that month. So that was the month of July. If you look at August, we had a 33% increase in the number of unduplicated individuals, and we had about a 50% increase in the number of people who we actually serve. So that would be the people who came a second and third time. We saw a big spike in April and May, and then a dip in June and July, which we attributed to the fact that people had gotten their stimulus payments or had gotten their unemployment with the extra bonus. And then the month of August hit, and it was more like October to me than August. October is always the month where we start to see jumps in people coming to the pantry, because it gets cold at night, the heat goes on, they realize they don't have oil in the oil burner, they have to fill the oil tank, and that takes away the food budget money. But we saw a dramatic increase in August, and September has started out just as busy.
Yeah.
Great. We have a question from Meg about what are the legal and health constraints and regulations working against community members and organizations like schools from growing food that can be donated. Jim, you may want to field this one first because you guys have been doing that up there for a long time.
You know, this, yeah, we have a very active group that runs God's Little Acre, which is about I think probably about a third of an acre, quarter of an acre out in the back. And they grow typically tomatoes, zucchini, eggplant, peppers, squash. They rely on the kids at the school, at the St. Philip School, and the greenhouse that they have to grow these things from seedlings. This year, they didn't have that. The kids were not in school, so I had to go out and buy plants. And we did not get the same variety this year that we typically have gotten. We didn't get any eggplant from them this year, which is always a disappointment because when people come and they see it and it was picked that morning, I mean, it's farm stand fresh, they get excited about it. But we were able to supplement that with food that was coming from Jaswell's. They're working, you know, pretty much on a drive-up basis by appointment. So they don't have as many customers coming in, but I think they're growing as much food. And I know they called us Friday last week and said, can you send somebody Saturday morning to pick up? So I asked one of the volunteers on his way in to just swing by there. He's got a truck rather than one of our sedans. And he comes back to the pantry at about 8 o'clock in the morning. They loaded a full pallet on his truck, and it was summer squash, zucchini, cucumbers, peppers, eggplant. I mean, Saturday was like Christmas at the pantry. And I don't think that, I don't know of any regulations that say that food that is grown and then donated, there are any liabilities. We've had a number of parishioners from their local garden who brought us, you know, their excess. They had too many tomatoes, too many zucchinis. And, you know, we put them out. I mean, it's with any produce, when you take it home, you wash it thoroughly before you use it or cook it. So I don't know of any problems with that. I may be unaware of some of the legal requirements.
Now, there's nothing to prohibit folks from donating fresh. And just like you, there are relationships that have been built over time between gardeners, farmers, and food pantries, so that this is the time of year when we see those donations happening. And for the larger farms, they're coming to the food bank, those donations, and then we're getting it out to their member agencies across the state.
One thing I would add, Lisa, is we had tomato and basil plants this year that we were offering to folks, you know, suitable for, you know, putting on their porch steps or something like that to grow their own. We had cucumbers, tomatoes, and basil, and those were donated by our garden, and people did have success. I did not. My tomato crop was like 3 cherry tomatoes that never even got red, so I don't have the green thumb that Paul Santucci has.
There's always next year. Andrew, what are the urgent needs? We've talked a little bit about some of this, but maybe just to summarize in terms of providing food at the food bank and across the state. And maybe this is a point to mention that we're surveying our member agencies in part to get more deeply at this question.
Yeah, and some of the things that Jim brought up before are true across the network, is that as we are serving a lot more people, many of our member agencies are coming up against capacity limits and trying to figure out how to overcome those limits. And we are surveying member agencies, we're talking to folks, we're meeting face-to-face to try to figure out how to expand capacity so that that doesn't end up being a bottleneck. Also to one of Jim's points earlier, we know that many of our member agencies, you know, they're not just in the business of running a food pantry. Often they're part of a congregation. They're part of a multi-service organization. And so other parts of those organizations have been hurt by COVID. As Jim mentioned, a parish may not have as many people donating because folks aren't able to come to services on site. You also have many of our food pantries are associated with a thrift store. Thrift store provides low-cost clothing, but also helps to raise money for the food pantry. Well, many of those thrift stores have been closed since March, so they've been losing income. And then you have other organizations that are much bigger and say, for example, may provide childcare. Well, childcare has been closed all spring, and that's been a loss of income. So in order to reduce any cost burden for our member agencies, the food bank has suspended all fees. We normally have a fee to be a member agency that gets charged depending on how much food you order, called shared maintenance. And that's all ended. So all the food that we're providing is going out to the community at no cost. And we're hoping that that provides a little bit of help in a time when a lot of the organizations we work with are struggling financially, in addition to the people they serve, and they're serving more people in the other parts of their organizations too. And then, you know, there's the whole issue that we touched on about how donated food is decreased during COVID since March, because the supermarkets are just trying to fill their own shelves. There's less extra food for the food industry to donate, and the whole supply chain has been gummed up. So what that means is that we have proactively at the food bank spent a lot of money ordering food from wholesale to make sure that those truckloads of rice and soup and canned vegetables keep coming in every single day. And what that takes is money. So donations of funds right now are really the critical thing that's helping us to stock up and keep all of our member agencies stocked up as well.
Great. We have a question from, or a comment and a question from our friends at Progreso Latino, one of our big agencies in Central Falls, who says that our communities are facing a public health crisis and economic crisis. Are there any policy and advocacy initiatives that we can all support?
Yes, I think that there's no question that, you know, keeping in mind that the people who are needing food assistance, who are feeling the economic effects of COVID-19, are also at high risk for complications from COVID-19. And so all of the efforts in the state to make sure that people have access to healthcare is really critical now in terms of ensuring the well-being of those communities, our communities. You know, obviously we're also concerned because right now it looks like children in Providence and Central Falls will not be in school. You know, that is absolutely the right decision in terms of safety and reducing the prevalence of COVID. The Department of Health knows what they're doing and the recommendations that we're making. My point is that because of that, children are going to be missing out on school lunch and school breakfast meals again, just like they were in the spring. And that is, you know, those meals are a very important source of nourishment and nutrition for kids. And without those meals, we really have to make sure that there is more support for parents so that they can feed their kids. And so we are advocating, as are many of the national organizations, for an increase in SNAP benefits, and also the return of a program that was available in the spring called Pandemic EBT, which gave parents of children a debit card for purchase of groceries at the supermarket. So those are two really important programs, increasing SNAP, the return of Pandemic EBT that we are advocating for, and that is at the federal level. So that's letting our congressional delegation know that that's a priority and really, really important in communities like Central Falls and Providence. This is, Lisa, this is Hunger Action Day?
It is Hunger Action Month and Hunger Action Day.
So it's a perfect time to, advocate.
Yeah.
We talked about volunteering and donating. The last one is advocate. If you want to help, it's equally important.
Absolutely. And we'll pick up right on that. The last question, because I can see we're almost at 9:30 here. When is the best time to donate financially? Is there specific times when your donation gets doubled by a corporation, or in our case, we have some individual donors who match? You want
Lisa,
me to field that one?
Yeah, you better answer that.
So we're fortunate that we have what's called the End Hunger Challenge Fund. And we have a handful of really generous donors who contribute to the fund to match donations from the general public. And usually around before Thanksgiving is when those matches start to kick in, around October. So you'll see us start to talk about that. We're building the resources for it right now, and we expect to have it. But really, any time is good. We are, as you can hear Andrew saying, we're purchasing food now all year long, and really making sure that we have the staff and the trucks and everything else we need to get the food out to agencies like St. Philip's and the 168 other agencies out there that we are supporting. So anytime is good. I think we posted in the chat, you can also create your own fundraising page, which is a great option for folks if you're not back in your offices or schools. You can't do a food drive. This is a way to sort of virtually do that and engage your community as well. And we did put the link over there for you. But this has been terrific. I'll let Andrew wrap it up and thank everybody from there.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And Jim, it was terrific to have you on today. Thank you so much for being here today, but also for everything that you do to help people who are coming for help at St. Philip.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I repeat what I started with. We could not do it without the consistent and reliable support of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank and all your staff and all your donors. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll be back with another town hall soon. Thank you.